Hi, my name is Paul Fritz, and I'm a senior account manager and onboarding specialist here at NetX, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak today. We thank you for showing up. Um, the museum industry is very near and dear to NetX's heart, and I'm going to be talking today about some tools that we have that can kind of help you with a challenge that we see coming on. Because it's such a short session, there won't be a Q&A in here, but you can certainly reach out to me afterwards with any questions you have. Also, you can stop by our virtual booth here on the platform. So want to start by sort of addressing what we see as a challenge, not only for the museum industry, but certainly for any digital asset manager these days, and that is that there's an ever-increasing volume of digital content. Both scope and the number of files that are coming in are constantly increasing. And being able to tag that and organize that and approve that in a timely manner with the same number, or in some cases fewer people, presents a challenge. And so we wanted to sort of talk about some of the tools that NetX has that can help you address that. And so we'll talk about ways that you would tag that stuff manually, say in our grid editor or with an external spreadsheet, and getting that data in from some automation. So using some business rules to be able to handle stuff in an automatic fashion. Pulling that data from external sources, so integrating with other systems through our data sourcing module or using API. A little talk about AI and how we see it today and what we're planning on coming out with here very shortly. And then finally, offloading some of that tagging and organizational work to NetX themselves for some managed services. So we'll start first with the idea of manually editing, which a lot of people still do in many situations, and using external worksheets like Google Sheets or Excel is really handy because they've got a lot of functionality in there to deal with data and to manipulate it, concatenate it, sort it, that sort of thing. And it's easy to then upload that later on. Our in-app grid editor presents that same sort of experience. So the way that you would come in and look at something in a spreadsheet type format, obviously it makes it really easy to see where holes are in your data when you have a large selection of assets. And so you can tag things individually, just like you would in the other parts of our interface. We also have a bulk editor attached to that. So being able to select one or more assets and quickly edit a bunch of fields and apply that across assets is also, we think, pretty efficient. And of course, that has a nice interface for all the various formats of fields that we have, controlled vocabularies, dates, text strings, that sort of thing. And many times you may find that you've got data that is good on one attribute or one asset and needs to be put onto, sorry about that, go back to the cloning there, from one asset to multiple assets. So if you've got something that has, say, the correct rights management information, you now have a bunch of new data that's coming in, the ability to clone from one asset to another is super handy. We also have an append mode. So there's situations where you have existing data, it may be quite disparate on a number of attributes and assets, and you need to add values without affecting the existing data. And so for that, we have an append mode that lets you put in, say, additional comments and description fields while preserving the existing, or adding new tags while persisting with the others. And so that's another way to continually layer on metadata for stuff that's already there. When you work in that external worksheet and you get all your data going, it's easy to upload that in NetX. So we accept Excel or CSV files, we upload it to the system, and you get some feedback here. As you can see at the bottom of the screen on that it's processing, it succeeded. You'll also get email notifications. So that's really great for adding metadata, changing metadata, in fact, even clearing metadata out. But we also have some additional functionality for columns that you can put in those to set things like asset visibility. So approving assets or restricting assets, and making them invisible to most users is something that you can do with an upload. We also allow you to rename assets and the files associated with them. And then finally, you can put in folder path information. So if you want to reorganize assets, if you want to create another whole folder structure, perhaps for a secondary interface, like a portal interface, it's easy to put in that folder path info in a spreadsheet, upload it to NetX. NetX will then add or move assets to those folders based on what you put, even creating the new folders for you. So that's kind of a handy way to, again, manage your system with external data. Talking now about some more automated ways of doing this, we do have something called auto tasks. It's a sort of a business rules engine where you can define some triggers and then some actions that happen. And that's really handy for a lot of processes that are repetitive. So things that are well defined and happen the same way all the time, those are great candidates for automation. We have also expanded our embedded metadata processing. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, we have something called metadata lookups. So if you have data that is structured in a way that one field affects the types of data that goes into another field, we have that as well. So like a city-state type relationship, for example. So auto tasks, again, as I mentioned, is sort of a rules engine. You can construct what we call match criteria. That's something that happens in the system, and that can trigger some action or notification. And so some of the examples that we have here would be parsing file names for some data. So you have stuff that comes in with a very controlled folder or a file naming convention. Accession numbers are in your file names, or event names or things like that. That can be harvested with an auto task to pull that out and apply it to an attribute. You can also organize assets based on some change. So you can say, hey, this is ready for use in the portal, or it's approved for marketing use. And maybe then that attribute gets moved or added from a more restricted folder to a folder where people can actually see it. Creating derivative and watermarks assets, very common, especially for folks that have their DAM tied to a website. As you upload certain types of assets, maybe you want to create those 3 different JPEG or GIF files for the web and have them attached as views on the asset. That can happen automatically with auto tasks. Notifications are another big one. So expiration dates, relicensing dates, they can drive emails to folks. So 30 days before something needs to be relicensed, email someone about that. And we can trigger much more complex workflows than that. Those are just some examples. As I mentioned, we've expanded our embedded metadata processing. So rather than selecting a namespace in a field, now you can put in any namespace and field that you'd like for pulling data from the file. So this opens up a lot of custom schemas for harvesting data. And that's a round trip operation. So we not only read the data, but we can write the data back into files. So if you've got, again, maybe rights information, rights notice, those sorts of things that you want to put into a file before it's downloaded, it's easy to set that up and have that automatically put in files when they're downloaded. This whole idea of embedded metadata is something that really leverages external tagging work. So if you have photographers that are using, Lightroom or Photo Mechanics, something like that, and tagging things, you get to pull that information into your DAM. And that means that you don't have to retag it yourself. We also have metadata lookup. So this is a situation where you have one field that has a value that might be related to values in another field. So city and state is a really obvious example. In this case, we have a campaign that you select, but it could be any sort of structured data that you would have where one value actually drives 2 or 3 or 4 other values. And so the metadata lookup lets you tag one thing and have 5 different values tagged. So we've talked about in the system and in the file metadata. Now let's talk about external systems and how that gets in. Certainly many people operate as their dams as a silo, meaning it's an application, they just use it, and it certainly works that way, but they don't have to operate that way. In fact, increasingly, the dam is just a layer in your infrastructure. And so integrations with other systems are more and more common, and certainly kind of make it much more powerful. So collections management system obviously is the one I'm sure that most museums are familiar with, but web platforms, archival systems, workflow systems, all of these sort of things may have information that you would want to get into the dam. And so we have two ways that that can be accomplished. And one is a module that we have called Data Source Sync, which is a configuration that you can work on with your NetX admin and pull data over. And then the other is the API. So we have a full application interface so you can create your own applications or customizations. So the data source sync module is really a way to have some other system be the source of truth. So for example, a collections management system, that source of truth for object data that comes into the dam. It's also structured, the data source sync module is structured so that you can round trip information. There might be some information in the dam that needs to get back to the external system. That's supported as well. And it's a really flexible architecture. So any connection to any database is really what it can do. So you may have other systems beyond, say, a CMS system that you want to connect. Multiple connections are supported with that module. So that's a really powerful tool to harvest or get information flowing between systems without programming. If you like programming, we have the API as well. So it's a full JSON API, and it lets you have full control over assets, folders, all your metadata, collections and views. So controlling them, uploading them, downloading them, transforming them, reorganizing, all of that can be done through our API. AI, obviously, hot topic these days, and not without a single point of view. There's a lot of people with a lot of ideas about that. We tend to see, at least in our opinion, that a lot of the AI can be useful, but it's often not precise enough for museum use. So object or logo or certain facial recognition might be good, but not enough for the type of rigor that museums need. And facial recognition is definitely out there. Again, maybe useful for some events, not so much for museum objects. The OCR functionality, we do find that to be useful. So scan documents and having those converted to text, things like that are really handy. Video speech to text and video closed captioning is really another place where we find it to be very useful. And in fact, NetX has recently worked on and released video speech to text functionality that also aids in searching. So taking those spoken words, converting them into transcripts and closed captions, really great for organizations that have a lot of video around, say, oral histories or interviews, things like that. The functionality that we have lets you, in fact, search very precisely for specific terms, and will take you, because those transcripts are tied to the time code, right to the spot in the video where that occurs. And so you can click on that and see it. You can also, of course, download those transcripts. So downloading those transcripts gives you then an opportunity not only for correcting any minor mistakes that might be there, but maybe you also want to translate those to different languages and then upload those different translated closed caption files and name them in a certain way, and the user's browser setting for language can automatically present those in NetX automatically without them having to select them. So video spoken word text is something that we're definitely proud of, and a recent addition to NetX. We're not stopping there, and we're going to continue on with some other stuff. So look very soon for a formal announcement for a new partner that we have. We're going to be working on some proprietary AI that's going to be built into NetX. So this is nice because you don't have any third-party processing. Stuff's not going out of the system to a third party for processing. And the things that we're sort of focusing on initially would be things like image summaries. So we feel that like alt tags, accessibility, those sorts of things are well suited to AI. So it's just a description of what does the picture look like, for example. The other that I think is kind of interesting is looking at both metadata and related assets or groups of assets to be able to generate some better tagging and better metadata for those individual assets. So a video that might be related to a document, somebody's talking about a document, you have both of those in the system. They can be like enhanced by looking at the group rather than individually at each asset. We're also working on sort of a DAM copilot, so some natural language search, so people can type in, just human sentences about what they're looking for without necessarily knowing the taxonomy and doing advanced searches and that sort of thing. So more common person type search, if you will. We've talked about a lot of automated processing and things that happen with the tools in the system, but of course, we're also here for you as people. And so one of the things that we offer are services to help you with either single projects, data migration, so you've got a new set of archives coming in or something like that. You need to quickly get the metadata managed and uploaded. Maybe you want to have a reorganization of your assets. We're deciding that we have a new use case and we need to take a whole selection of assets and reorg them. I've also done projects recently where people had very large vocabularies and they needed to sort of clean them up, names of people throughout history, and the names change when they get married or they get a title or they're written incorrectly, and taking all those values, concatenating them, putting them all together in a single controlled vocabulary where they may have been in multiples. Those sorts of things we're happy to help with. We also do for many customers full managed site curation. Or helping them with their taxonomy definition and their governance on their metadata, finding the holes in the metadata so that they can be filled in and the search works better. And then finally, we're also here for physical digitization or physical storage, realizing, of course, that that's sort of the purview, and you have a lot of expertise in that in the museum industry, but we're certainly here to augment and support that if you needed, additional capacity. So again, I'm sorry that we can't answer any questions right now, but happy to answer them at our booth, or if you'd like to engage with us directly outside in the platform, we can do that. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to us today and see what we have both today and coming this year to help you with that.